From AOL Platforms, here's Dan Ackerman. Comcast Media 360, Andrew Ward. AT&T AdWorks, Chris Monteferrante. And from Dish, welcome James Shears, along with Trillia's Karen Agresti.
Okay, so before we start, I'd like to say a big thank you to AT&T for sponsoring our session. Happy Christmas Day. For sponsoring our session. They've been a sponsor in the past, and we really appreciate their support for TVnext. So let's get right into it, and we'll do our first Back to the Future, with Dan. So Dan, last year you were here, and you were on a data-driven TV panel with Stacy. And you talked a lot about how data and technology was going to make for a smarter TV buying. So now it's a year later, and you read in the press, it's really moving from using data and technology, not necessarily for smarter TV or optimization of TV, but really going to the one-to-one addressable of messaging. So where does addressable fit in the whole TV ecosystem, and why is there such momentum to get to the end so quickly?
Yeah, well, things have definitely accelerated quite a bit from our conversation last year. All the M&A activity that's happened, both in the distribution and in the data space. But I think the traditional definition of household addressable has really been that one-to-one targeted at the set-top box in a household in a traditional TV experience, and that's changing pretty drastically. It's been probably 10 years in the making of getting it to scale, but it is definitely at scale today. You have roughly 50 million homes that are capable of targeting and deploying advertising at that level and growing pretty quickly. But what's evolving is this definition of TV. It's not just at the set-top box. We're now talking about TV experiences being consumed in a lot more platforms than ever before. So now it's VOD on your set-top box, it's ad-supported streaming services with VOD, it's TV everywhere. So you have this great TV content in an addressable environment that's now expanding, and consumers are really pushing us to do that. So, and then this consolidation that's happening. You have Dish and AT&T DirecTV and AT&T getting together. You have Verizon and AOL. So this marriage of data, distribution, and technology is really helping to accelerate it. So I think all the forecasts and prognostications of last year of how long it would take have been accelerated pretty significantly. And I think you'll hear from the panelists today that's real campaigns, real impact on businesses is being executed today at really good scale.
So there's been a lot of press in the last 30 days or so about all of the STB data being kind of merged or whatever. You've got Comcast and RentTrack merging, the rumors, Andrew, that you might be selling your data, even TiVo getting into the space. Why is that all happening, and what's the big on that?
Well, I think it speaks to the value of it. I think the operators have been sitting on this data for quite a while, and advertisers recognize the value when you see things like household addressable. But the market's changing. The consolidation with ComScore and RentTrack and Kantar, that's where I think the opportunity for some standardization and greater availability of that data is important to have. But it really just shines a light on how valuable it is. Programming and context are super important, but the data about consumers. So you start to see that marriage of digital, where you've had this really granular data for targeting and for measurement, now available on TV. And that's where marketers want to go. They want addressable, premium video at scale, not just lean back in television, but across all devices and all formats. And now those assets are there, and these companies coming together, both on the data and measurement side and on the distribution and technology side, now can realize that today. It's not a thing that we have to keep kicking the can and saying 24 months from now. It's happening today, and I think these guys will be able to talk about very specific examples.
Yeah, just to jump in on the theme, I think for us, the sort of momentum that we're seeing behind it and the progress in the marketplace is really based on this premise that I think a number of folks earlier this morning talked about, which is this notion of accountability and this idea that as margins compress and as advertisers are asked to do more with less, we think that those media partners that provide the greatest level of transparency and accountability around performance measurement, not simply on a traditional cost per point or cost per thousand GRP basis, but really being able to tie back to performance measurement from an ROI perspective. And our ability to, I think we have a pretty unique opportunity as an industry of combining household level consumer targeting data, tying our name, address, subscriber file in an anonymous, privacy compliant manner. I joke that that's something I have to say at the outset. For our attorneys, anonymously aggregating data against our subscriber file, and then being able to link back ad exposure, and then tying that ad exposure not just to media consumption, but actually brand consumption. And that's where I think there's a significant appetite in the marketplace from the advertiser perspective to say, how can we bring that level of accountability that was once sort of historically the domain exclusively of digital into the television ecosystem?
Yeah, and just really quick there as well. I think the interesting thing from our side is it opens up really fantastic conversations with advertisers. So we talk about the accountability, but the accountability goes deeper than sales lift. Certainly sales lift is important, but you can also go deeper and talk about brand awareness. You can even do different testing. You can test whether or not you're getting responses back based on the creative you were sending. So it's not just about the sales lift. I think that's really an important point, is that it enables the conversation to happen.
And this is arguably the fastest growing segment in the TV media space today. Probably this year, you probably size the market about $300 million, and we're projecting, I would say, probably 3 times, 4 times that for next year. I don't know if you would agree with that or not, but I've been hearing that from some of the agencies that we've been doing business with. So, there's no question that this technology has significant value to advertisers, and I think we're taking a page out of the digital book with it and applying it to the television model.
But to that point, so it's $300 million, but TV is a $70 billion industry.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Okay. A lot of it has to do with the lack of available inventory and client adoption. But what do we need to do to get more than the 40 million homes or the 50, as you say? How do we get national distribution and national partners involved? What do we need to do from a technology standpoint? Or is it something that's years away?
I'll take one crack at it. I mean, there are other providers that are jumping in now. So, Verizon will be deployed soon this year. That adds a fairly large, 6 million footprint to that, and it's starting to roll out across, all the providers sitting at the table and others that aren't here. So there's still a lot of green field of growth just in the addressable space.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of variables, Karen, hidden in your question there. One, sort of a technology question, right? So for those of you who've been in Boston for a number of years, Karen and I were talking backstage. She used to, or has a home on the Cape, which was formerly run by a cable company, Adelphia. When Comcast came into the marketplace, you have to recognize that there were sort of a bundle of walled garden analog operating cable companies, Greater Media, Media One, Continental Cable, TCI. And from Comcast perspective, we had to bundle all of those, tear down that analog architecture, build a digital infrastructure, and then now start to migrate that into a cloud-based architecture with our X1 deployment, for those of you who may have the X1 product. But it was a bit like pushing a string of trying to deploy addressability in an analog world, right? Just from an infrastructure standpoint. So in terms of wind in our sails, this evolution from an operational standpoint, from a technology standpoint of moving the industry from analog to digital or cloud-based is going to greatly accelerate that, which we're talking about in terms of adoption. But there are a couple other variables I'd bring, sort of point out that are kind of macroeconomic in nature. The first is this idea, if you look at Comcast business before the NBC Universal acquisition, advertising was a big business. It was kind of a $2-3 billion business inside of a $45 billion company. Now in the NBC acquisition, the advertising business becomes our second largest standalone business within the combined company, only behind residential video. So the cable company has a vested interest, whereas that church and state historically used to exist. Now the cable company says, hey, the advertising business is vitally important to the overall economic health of the company. So when you combine that sort of macroeconomic environment with the technology, that's when you start to see the sort of adoption that I think has been, we've been waiting for in the marketplace.
You made a point about the data, though, and I think it's important to point out that it's not just the expansion of household addressable as one inventory pool. As the data starts to align with digital, now there's a addressable opportunity in mobile, in desktop, in tablet that aligns very well. So for marketer thinking real scale across the way consumers are consuming content, the data component does open up a very big opportunity.
We've just scratched the surface there, right? Because the idea of cross-screen addressability is now coming to the surface. We're starting to look at that in the second phase of this, and being, part of one of the largest mobile companies out there. We have a lot of data available to us. The question is, how do we connect the dots on that? What's the right media mix there? How do we send a spot to a viewer, and then with a viewer that potentially has 2 or 3 handsets in their home, and then deliver a similar spot to that handset in the marketplace? And I think, when you can connect the dots like that, then you're going to extract real value.
And I would also say that the infrastructure is only telling part of the story as well, right? I mean, I think the data is extremely important, but I don't think that every advertiser is as comfortable with the data and what they want to accomplish with it. So I don't know that it's necessarily a race to light up as much inventory as possible as it is an education process to make sure that we're having discussions around data, having discussions around metrics, and really just trying to push that angle before we start, kind of running before we're walking.
Okay, so addressable has been around since, I think you said 2004, maybe? Was the
Yeah,
first test?
kind of a thing.
Yes, so we're running out of mics here. So, you guys all have been really involved in this space. You've worked with a lot of different categories and advertisers. So what categories are really embracing it? Who's doing really well in it? How are they using it, and why is it successful?
I'll take a stab at starting on that and not answering it by any one category. I'd say there are sort of 3 variables where we find success. One is a brand that has a well-defined target. And when I describe a well-defined target, I don't mean adults 25 to 54, but on the other hand, it becomes a slippery slope a bit, what James was describing. I've been in any number of meetings where we talk about the opportunity to use data, and I'll say, hey, great, I want Asian ancestry, kids 2 to 11, own a shotgun, convicted felon, and have been on a Disney trip. And we'll say, well, there are 2 of those folks.
Raise your hand.
It'd be easier for us just to drive to their home than actually worry about an ad. But so those folks that have a well-crafted target, and then lo and behold, a well-crafted creative that resonates with that target, because invariably say, hey, I want to do this. Oh, but my spot's built for women 25 to 54. So a target that resonates with the creative, and then a metric for success of what the measure for success actually is. And as James described, it could be brand awareness, it could be purchase intent, it could actually be sales attribution. But those brands that I think have a sort of a strategic approach in those 3 areas are those that we see the most success with, and that spans from QSR to financial services to auto, even to, we did a campaign with some of these guys who smoked link sausage, and you think, well, what the hell, everybody eats smoked link sausage. Well, no, actually, everybody doesn't. So, yeah, I know it's shocking, but so those would be the variables that I would suggest, sir.
So a great point, too, that you made is there's so much inertia around age and gender as a target, and that's the way business has been transacted forever, right? Because that's what we've been measured against. But now with the advent of addressable and what we can do with that, we could go much deeper. We could look at 2, 3 different attributes. We can target those homes, and we can deliver the home direct, and we can deliver those homes, and in a verified way. So.
And I think just to kind of belabor the data point as well, loyalty card programs, as an example, is a fantastic avenue for data. So it could be retail, it could be CPG, it could be really anything. And that first-party data allows you to hone in on your target a little more appropriately, allows us to have a conversation about how to design a campaign that would be successful, and then ultimately make sure we're driving to whatever metric you're needing to drive toward.
There was an article in Ad Age and it said, a call out to CMOs and advertisers, get your data in order, because it's about getting that data and making that data actionable. Now we have a platform where we can take that data, we can look at the back end, we can measure ROI, we can measure attribution on that. But many times we'll go to advertisers and we'll say, look, you have to give us more than age and gender if you want to have good results here. And it's starting to happen. I mean, we've done over 500 campaigns, 100 advertisers. The ones that have participated, 95% of them come back. So, I mean, that's a testament that this works, it's here, it's now, and, we can help you.
And when you talk about sort of brand managers and you look at the digital marketplace, the digital guys have done such a great job of sort of bottom of the funnel attribution, right? That they take credit for that last click. And as a brand marketing guy, you're not going to get fired by saying, hey, it's an accountable media. I know, the touch that audience delivered. From my perspective, we don't think that people are born with search Lincoln MKZ in their medulla oblongata. It just didn't appear in their brain matter. It was built by top of the funnel brand awareness, brand funnel. And how do you combine the power of world-class content that we represent across the portfolio of TV, that environment of TV, yet combine it with bottom of the funnel data and analytics? And I think we have the opportunity to bring the best of both environments. That level of accountability in concert with that brand building top of the funnel environment.
We're halfway through and the word programmatic hasn't come up, so I'm going to just throw it out there just so we can get it on the table.
It wasn't allowed.
Yeah,
No
this is absolutely permeating not just the addressable space. I think this application of data to the top of funnel comment is happening with smart linear, if you want to call it that, and informing broad-based stuff, whether it be cable network, broadcast. Now getting the real scale of the individual household, but it really does come back to, for an advertiser being prepared, really understanding like what is the point of that investment, not just reach and frequency. And there's still a lot of marketers that are managing their media on overall reach and frequency across different platforms. So there's got to be a pretty well-constructed KPI of what you're doing, so you go into it, manage expectations, and know what success looks like.
And I'm going to jump in on the programmatic thing there just really quick. It actually lends itself very well to addressable. And so the reason I don't think it should be out of bounds even for this discussion is really because if you think about addressable, it is actually sort of hard to execute. There's lots of little data elements you need. You need to have lots of conversations. You need to compile data. You need to compile inventory. And so programmatic from that standpoint actually could be an opportunity to leverage those efficiencies just from an automation standpoint and really drive that point home. From Dish's standpoint, we've actually jumped into that marketplace. We just today announced that we've created our own supply-side platform, and some people are scared of it, even internally, but the entire purpose is to help scale the product of addressable and to make it easier to buy for advertisers.
Okay, so who has good eyes to read that?
Who wins with addressable TV? Brands with a clear target, creative built just for that audience, and a defined measure of success. That was the comment. I don't know if that's really a question.
Who the hell said that?
Who are you? Okay. All right, you brought up lack of standardization. What are the other challenges that clients are having to deal with that are trying to get into the space? I mean, the one I think of is you have to do multiple creative for multiple targets. Is something like visible world technology and dynamic creative really, going to be affordable to clients down the road? Because right now it's kind of...
Yeah, well, it's interesting, Carrie, you bring it up. We find most of, I'll let these guys jump in here. We find most of our addressable partners aren't running different creative. They're not building separate creative for the, and I'll let you guys jump in on it. No. So, how that evolves over time will be interesting to see. But from our standpoint, the opportunity for us to begin to, getting back to your question, I think the challenge of how we get scale, I liken back to days when we started in this business in the cable world, where in Boston there were 8 MSOs and 55 head ends, and the cost of doing business wasn't a function of CPM, it was the transactional cost on the agency side. So when I think of programmatic, it's really about how do we create ease of doing business so that your margin, you can make money on the transaction. And as your margins on the buy side get compressed, we have to be able to create an infrastructure. That's where people say, oh, you guys are competitive with one another. No, we have an interest in coming up with an industry solution with a rising tide lifts all boats strategy across all of us. Because if we don't make it profitable for you from a transactional standpoint, integrating data, hauling back campaign performance measurement, tying back to optimization opportunities, if we can't create that environment, it's not going to scale to the degree that we think the strategic value represents.
Okay, so we only have a couple minutes left, and who would have thought? So I wanted to talk about two other things. First of all, because everybody's talked about Trump, now we have to. 2016 is going to be a big political year. We know in 2012, Obama used addressable and targeted TV as part of his strategy. What do we think the category is going to do in 2016?
Go ahead. You know what? Here, let me jump in really quick. So we think there's incredible value there, and it's mostly same theme as what we've been talking about. The political landscape changed somewhat with Obama because he drove efficiencies with the data. So I think I read in the Rent-Track case study that he was 20 or 30% more effective, and that was because he found efficiencies using the data. He layered on that data to buy traditional TV. He also tried to target in addressable, and so from that side, AT&T, and Dish created a new selling proposition. We've combined entities for the political realm, and it's called D2 Media Sales. And it's essentially the same thing. We are looking to target Republican voters, Democratic voters, those that are undecided, those that have a particular affinity to a particular issue or something like that. So it's really about aggregating that data and then targeting more appropriately than just single DMA, if that makes sense. So we think there's great value there.
I'll give you an anecdotal response to it. So we were down in Washington meeting, and in Washington you got Republican shops and Democratic shops, right? So we were sitting with a Republican shop that ran the, I can say because it's over now, but the Chris Christie campaign, governor of New Jersey. And we sat with the agency, and there was this guy who'd been doing the business for a while. He had a kind of a chain-smoking cigar and a glass of gin and a steak, and he was saying, we buy Fox News and Golf Channel. And we said, well, when we talked to the campaign headquarters, they said we were trying to reach independent Hispanic voters. I said, I don't know that the independent Hispanic voter is a big Fox News viewer, right? So call me crazy, but so what we did was we took the voter registration file of the state of New Jersey, hauled it back to household level commercial ad exposure, and lo and behold found out that Fox News and golf wasn't the sweet spot for those voters. So bringing that level of accountability and performance measurement from a, I think Civis was an outfit that worked with Obama a couple of cycles ago. I think the entire vertical, that entire category is going to move in that direction.
Okay, so we've got a couple minutes left. Want to ask each of you where your company's roadmap is for addressable in the next, say, 24 months. I know a year ago you were on the panel and you said it would be 5 years before addressable would be...
As I said, things have changed.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's hear from each of you about where you're going. So.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's really about bringing mobile data and television data together. Ultimately, it's a unified ID, so we can understand the consumer's journey from the path to purchase across any of these devices. Verizon sits in a pretty unique place with the scale of mobile data that's available. Add in the Fios data for 6 million homes per TV, but that's really where it is. And it's not just with our owned and operated, it's to partner through our ad technology business with other folks in the industry, data, technology, so we can bring that capability to advertisers. I can get an addressable base in the 150 million range across screens as consumers are demanding that's where they want their content.
Great.
That's the focus.
Andrew?
So one thing in terms of, again, sort of macro pressures, I think we occupy an interesting place in the market. Comcast, NBC Universal, we're not only one of the largest sellers of video advertising, we're also, I think, the 4th largest buyer of video advertising. And even if Dunkin' Donuts and every one of your clients sees no interest in addressable, which we don't think will be the case, but even if you all see no interest in, we're going to deploy it if for no other reason to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of our own marketing spend.
Gotcha.
We probably, I'll make up a number that'll get quick, we probably spent $300 million sending triple play messages to existing triple play customers and doing nothing but pissing them off. So even if the marketplace says, I see no value, we're going to deploy it
That's how it
if-
started,
for no other reason from that marketing spend. So we've got 22 million homes, give or take, 19 million addressably enabled on the VOD platform. We'll probably get to half that number from a linear standpoint next year. So there's a significant push corporately behind that. We think there are two benefits, as I said, not only from the advertising marketplace that we're all a part of, but also from our own internal marketing perspective.
Great. Chris?
You know, I think it's, Karen, I think it's scale. I think it's continuing to grow the business, continuing to build that infrastructure, as Andrew said. I think it's about standardization across our collective platforms. I think you're going to see that all come together, and, you know, that's an area where we can definitely work together on, and, you know, D2, I think, is a good example of that. And cross-screen addressable, to Dan's point. I think that's going to be, you know, really important. You can't look at these things in a vacuum. You can't look at these things in just one silo as part of your media buy. How does one act with the other one? And we're starting to see results in those areas too.
Great. And Jay?
I would say that, much like everybody else, we're really looking at the cross-screen. Dish has come out with their own digital property, Sling TV, which we view as an interesting extension of addressable TV. So we think that's interesting. I think we'll continue to play out the technology to make it easier for people to buy. And then I think it's really, from our side, I think it's really going to be an education question. It's how do we educate the market? How do we continue to drive forward? How do we keep pushing that number beyond the 300 million?
Great. Well, thank you guys all. You were very informative.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Yeah.